7.
Do you have anything in particular?
No, I told you yesterday what I had in general is that I wanted to go back to chronology and kind of events that have happened in your life. And I guess there's, the kind of holes or the war is one. In terms of what we've even touched on, which was 7 years of, I imagine, fairly intense experience.
Well, let me bounce on a couple of things. I want to give you this, I believe, and to keep for whatever reasons. Now, you might have remember a little of it, the NBC thing.
Mm-hmm. No, I do.
What's difficult to share with people. Now, people look at that. You recall as the woman on the team was expected to do the cooking and so forth, and people would look at the macho, the traditional feminist stuff. For example, they won't see. I'm trying to not justify myself, but just to say how hard it is to get certain things across. They won't see that I put that woman on the team, and I didn't say those words. Okay, they'll see this Nigerian, and they'll like what he says, etc., etc. But they won't see that I paid his way over because I wasn't sure exactly where I was going, but I knew this subconsciously, at least, this business of charity, this business of saving the poor pagans, etc., was bullshit. I knew that getting rid of 9 of your 10 wives so you could be baptized was bullshit, not freedom. I wanted an African to be a missionary to white America. This is why I had him over here, why he's in that film. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't see, those things are not. History has to be seen from the whole context of the time. So unconsciously or something or other, my whole life is whenever I feel I'm getting caught up in the system, I've tried to get out. And these are little Camp Concordia took over a nothing Bible camp. Had nothing to do with nature and the use of the camp. It's purely for proselytizing reasons.
That was the purpose of it, you mean?
That's what it was. And so I bring a non-salaried staff of 25 young college and a couple of high school students. And we quickly got it up to 118 kids a week and stuff. I took the best. There's a lot of stories here, but I'm just trying to make a point now. I took John McKnight, second team All-American, Bob McNamara, our best defensive lineman. I made them in charge of the garbage detail. driving a 1913 John Deere tractor pulling a wagon. They scrubbed the johns. They took out the garbage. And I spent, as director of this big outfit, I spent 2 to 3 hours, check Lowy on this, every night, practically with a toothbrush scrubbing the kitchen myself. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this. One was the health situation was, there was epidemics in all camps of nausea. And by God, we have a clean camp. And the best way to do it is to have the most popular guys in the camp. And so it was like a Pied Piper when the John Deere made its rounds to all the cabins. Little kids would run after John and Bob and want to be on the garbage detail. They didn't want to go archery. They want to be on the garbage detail. Now, I don't even know why I'm saying this, except I've always tried to break the mold. That's why I have never, ever worn a pair of jeans. Because it's the in thing. It's the most in thing I've ever seen by non-working people. I'm being corny, but and I've always didn't think things. I never had it together. Didn't think things had to be the way they were. And I'm bouncing all around right now, but I'm surrounded in Chicago with the 60s. I'm surrounded a little bit later with urban studies to this day, 100% dedicated to politics as the way to change. And God, there was pretty powerful voices, and it was leaning me that way, including the Ed Sedlowskis and everything were leading me that way. But then I had a heresy trial led by a moderate bishop and moderate administrative staff, not the right wing. And unheard of that a layman is tried for heresy. But I saw the bullshit of politics. This moderate liberal regime had only one goal in mind, even in the church, to be reelected. And they didn't want to offend the Birchers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, at all costs. And I could give you story after story. Well, that was it on politics for me. I saw the colors. And I saw the exact same thing in the church, in my local church. I saw the president of the bank, who was president of the congregation, lie through his teeth to the congregation rather than identify with Valparaiso Builders Association, which he had for economic reasons. So I guess, but all I'm saying is, when you see a picture, when you see a film, I'm not sure you can see the whole thing. You know what I mean? But all my leaving a successful football career, in which I was good at coaching, was always done voluntarily. I began to see I was being conditioned by the rat race of football and winning in competition. I knew what it took to win. I mean, I introduced high technology. That's a relative thing here. In our conference, I was the first one that used film analysis to the nth degree and scouting to the nth degree. I introduced those things. That's how come we won. We had 14 points before the game started, and then we hung on. Now, interrupt on any of these things.
I could interrupt on each of them. This heresy trial, and you talked with me a little bit about it in the past, but it is strange. I mean, what authority do they have for trying a layman? I mean, how do you come under their discipline? I mean, other than, I'm sure you submitted to it, but it's like,
I was an officer.
It's like the police force is going to discipline a civilian for misconduct on the job.
No, but I was an officer in the church.
What church?
Missouri Synod, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and I was director, founder too, and creator of Peace Corps for the overseas and North American for the church.
You were on the church staff? You were paid by the Missouri Synod?
See, that was an interesting thing. I was not hired to do. They wanted to be in competition with Kennedy's Peace Corps, who was taking all the young adults away from the church. The church was losing them by leaps and bounds. All major church bodies were, okay? And they wanted to establish a church Peace Corps, overseas and local and national. And they looked and looked and looked for one of their own, namely a clergyman trained in the seminary to do the show. A combination, I know this pretty well. They looked for 2 or 3 years, a combination of not being able to find a person who would appeal to the modern young adult on the one hand, and who would lead them, and secondly, who wanted to lead young adults and take the risk of leaving their parish. Now, if you had a clergyman, you won't really have a heresy trial. If there's somebody that's not doing your will from the top down, you just get rid of them, send them back to the parish. Now, when they finally came around to me, a very successful football coach for Lutheran, and won a little, we were national scoring champs, had the highest scoring team in the country, and had a bowl game in Florida. So it wasn't big notoriety, but it was a little, And there was a few little articles written in Lutheran circles.
Sorry, what is a high scoring what?
College team in the country. And this is all part of my makeup too. The church has always had a role to play, since certain things in the war, especially. But to this day, I started the elder system, which has got little cell groups, only they've really absolutized it now, of neighborhood groups, I was the youth director, and I had no time. I was teaching full time, which was, at that time meant about 10 times the teaching load you got today, coaching every sport in the world, but putting it all in football. I was youth director. I took at Emmanuel Youth and Church voluntarily. I taught Bible class. I taught Jody Kretzmann. I taught Tell Show, all of them, the whole crew. I took kids at my expense and time to Whiting. We had no pool, no wine or anything, to a pool in Whiting once a month, to a swim party, all kinds of stuff. I'm very active as an elder, as a youth director, as a Bible class teacher. God, what more can you want? For some reason, I have never ever considered being an usher. So this combination, finally, even though I was a layman, they didn't want a layman. But here's a guy with athletics and active in the church. He's pretty close to God, you know. So they asked me if I would create and direct a Peace Corps. And so I walked off the football field and I said, yeah.
Who recruited you?
The Board of Young People's Work had the responsibility. And so they had to carry a lot of load during the trial, too. But what I was getting to is that they didn't know how now to induct me. They thought they'd have a laying on hands church service. Then if they did it that way, don't ask me what that is, then I would sort of be under their thing. And I said, no, I would appreciate it if you just write a contract, a 2-year contract renewable, if things are going well. I want at least 2 years to get a start on this thing. So I had a contract, which they renewed the second time, and ready to buy me off on that one. But all I'm saying here is the difficulty they now had with a layman. I had a contract. What do? Pay me after certain things happen, they didn't want me anymore. What do? Buy me off? Pretty hard to do when the church is going under each year. I mean, just publicly, it's pretty hard to do. So the best way to do it was to charge me with heresy. They could get rid of me. I don't think legally even they could have then without buying me off. I hadn't ever even thought of the legal stuff. But different things were happening that suddenly made them decide that the bad outweighed the good. Even though there was good that was appreciated by all sorts of folks. Just I'm skipping all the reasons here of the trial, but just so that you know, I'm very close to the early participants, Peace Corps people, and they were dynamite people from all over the country. The Bill Karpinkos, the Feltons, you know, and Evanston and so forth. I got a card.
This POPV?
Yeah. I got a card the other day from the Feltons and said that they heard about my heart attack and wished me well. Just a card, and said, I'm sure we'll see you in St. Louis at the POPV reunion. Interesting. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. And Karpinko got an invitation. All the folks that I was intimate with. I mean, we went through 3 months in training in Chicago, West Side and South Side together, going through ups and downs, urban studies multiplied by 20 times in terms of dynamics.
You going to find out about it?
Well, I did. But you see, when the trial was over, and I was finished with POPV, they got rid of all but they kept the Japanese thing, and they have a new program called is it Vista, something like that, which is domestic in the States.
Well, the government does.
No, well, the church has one something, I don't know what it's called. These are all offshoots of what I started, and that's been going on for 20, 30 years. And so they wanted a reunion. The church has been involved since then, see? Only, so they sent out this invitation to everybody, but everybody except me.
They overlooked the director.
The founder. Who, I mean, when I say founder, the creator, the founder, Japan, Philippines, Lebanon, all of it, Argentina, Alabama, all of it. This film, Nigeria Coming This Way, everything was my idea, okay? Everything that they're doing in Japan. But you see, even I'm all over the map again, but taking Japan, the one that still exists, very, very interesting. It became pretty big. I was proud of the folks that I sent over there, Mark Krutzman and different folks.
Oh, is that how he got over there?
That's how he's over there.
No kidding.
And the first 3 dudes that I sent over there spent 6 hours a day learning the language, and spoken and written. 6 hours a day. That's how come Mark can speak it fluently, teaches there at everything under the sun. Rolling Stones front man in Japan for a year. But they had respect to the nth degree, these early guys that I sent over there. Respect to the nth degree for Zen Buddhism and other faiths. This upset certain missionaries over there. And there was conflict because it didn't totally upset. The Japanese were beginning to train their own and were beginning to desire the Japanese Lutheran Church, not a mission wing of Missouri Synod. You follow me? But they were very loyal to Missouri Synod, very respectful, and all that sort of thing. But our people created a little tension in it. All right. I had determined from day one whether it's going to New York or going to Africa or Japan, I am not going to use my budget on junkets. Went nowhere. Jerry Glavey was in India. I went nowhere. That's unheard of. I mean, a director today would have been in India, would have been in Japan, would have spent all his time looking at his field. I didn't. Once you left the training, good luck, brother. Write me when you can. It's just like POPV. I mean, just like Project Neighbor's intent. Once you make a commitment, 6 families or something to this family, y'all are in it, period. That's it. Okay? I might as well finish a little bit on this Japanese thing. Now, the tension grew. They did their job and did it well in the churches. They did their very churchy job. taught Bible class and so forth. Undergirding all this was in my mind. I had been to Japan in 45, 51, and 67. Was what was happening in Japan. It went from the most lucrative mission field the world's ever known right after the war. By 51, who needs Christianity? Because they had made capitalism and technology synonymous with Christianity prior all the way up to 1951. You with me? I don't have to explain that. I mean, the Japanese have always worshipped our technology and know-how before the war.
Mm-hmm.
And they always assumed that that was part of the faith. By 51, they discovered you didn't have to be a Christian to be in high tech. Huh? And the moment that was discovered, that was the end of the lucrative mission field. It went downhill to it's nothing today. Oh, yeah, you got this on tape.
Go ahead.
But anyhow, that's just sort of undergirding me through this process. Now, I get a call from the Japanese church people. Would I come over and discuss some of these little difficulties we're having with your people? I said, sure. And they said they'll pay my way. My budget didn't pay my way. And not only that, some of these guys like Mark Kretzmann threw in extra bucks. Could they have me for 2 or 3 days and pay my way for 2 or 3 days? They wanted to show me some things. So I landed in the airport. Know it as well as any. Anyhow, what was the name of the airport? And then got on a flight to Hokkaido, where I'd been in 45 incidentally, to Sapporo. I'll never forget getting in the back end of that 747, absolutely full with businessmen going to Sapporo, the northern island, Japan, jam-packed, 3 here, 3 here. And all I'm seeing is a sea of black heads, white collars, and black coats. That's all I saw. And here, and a slob in the back, you know. I was met there by Tom Wright, who is now a Zen Buddhist monk. Brilliant guy. Written a couple of books since then. And Mark Kretzmann, and I cannot think of this other guy, really fine, I can't think of his name, from Virginia. Brilliant. And they had planned my 3 days. We went to a Russian restaurant. I'll never forget, a hole in the wall. And anyhow, I won't go through the details. But then, leaving me alone, they put me in a bus to go out of town about 25 miles to a geisha hotel. I don't know. This is interesting. I don't know. They wanted me to meet with the leader of the Behadrin sect. Now, in Japan, politically, communism is a little bit to the right of center.
Mm-hmm.
Among the political activists, who are all undergraduates. Mm-hmm. Once you're graduate, it's over. Mm-hmm. Until then, you can blow up the railroad station, anything you want. But the Behadrin sect were the people who smuggled naval personnel through Russia to Sweden who wanted to get out of the war in Vietnam. And they knew that I was a fairly large factor in Chicago area on taking care of people who are trying to avoid jail but not go to war, and who were slipping to Canada and resisting the draft CO-wise. And also I was responsible for taking care of COs during their 2 years of approved work. Mm-hmm. And they just wanted the two of us to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what in the hell. I'm so naive and stuff. I didn't know what was going on. I get to the hotel and it's 180% Japanese all the way. You know, no green, no white stuff. And so they put me in a kimono and slippers right away and shuffled me to a room, and they got a translator for me. And then they sent me down to the pool area where I'm stripped, and I bathe sitting on a stool, and then I get into the hottest scalding water you ever saw in your life, felt in your life. And once you make that, it's comfortable, you know. Once you get scalded, feels good. And then you get out and you sweat for the next 20 minutes like you never sweated in your life. Then you get wiped off. Now I go to eat. And I'm stretched out, and pillows and everything else, and geishas come in and play music for me and stuff. It was very pleasant. It was very clean. And I'm sure I could have had other things if I wanted it, but I didn't. And then after I'm very comfortable, very satisfied, very clean, very eaten, comes the entourage in the Behavior sect and translators. We talked the whole night long. What an experience. God, and that was it. I mean, there was no project, no how can I help you, how can you help me, nothing like that. Just reflection and conversation by some pretty sensitive, caring, deep-thinking people. Leader in particular, I forgot his name. And that's a hell of an experience. Then had the meetings in Tokyo with the church officials, and it was sort of, if you can imagine this, George, it's sort of like meeting with real nice missionaries that are all Susan Hordes.
Yeah.
And they're not quite comfortable with some Georges on the scene. And I'm very respectful of the Georges on the scene and know how important they are, okay? I mean, you got the picture.
Yep.
That was the picture. I thought I did all right. I don't know. But the political pressure, see, that's interesting now. The Japanese church became, shortly after that, independent. And they kept the Peace Corps. They wanted people coming over. So in that sense, I won. And the Missouri Synod now did the recruiting instead of me, which instead of going to Stanford and UCLA and University of Michigan, I went everywhere. I talked all over the place. They went to Concordia something or other in Ann Arbor, Concordia something in Newark, in Nebraska or Concordia something, and they made sure they had the right people to send to Japan. Mm-hmm. But Japan was autonomous. but they wanted the Peace Corps.
The POPV.
Yeah. And so that's what's happening today. That reunion is POPV reunion kept alive by this history that I just told you. It's not alive in all the other places. The church killed it. But they couldn't kill it because of the independence of the Japanese Lutheran Church, who wanted it. They like our people. And they like the people that I had over there, which they don't get anymore. And they're going to be paying a price. It's long-winded, but
did that have anything to do with the heresy trial?
Not directly. That had a little to do, because I was called in a couple times earlier, nicely, questions are raised, and before I went over to Japan, they were worried about this thing with the Japan, what's going on in Japan, okay? And they call me in, would you diagram on the board? This is a couple of boards met, you know. I mean, already my presence being there and explaining this was something rotten in Denmark, okay? And I'll never forget it. Would you diagram how your people fit in the Japanese scheme of things, okay, church-wise? And I'll never forget. I'll do it today. I've done it in Project Neighbors on an early sheet that we didn't keep. But on the blackboard, at the very bottom of the board, I put the President of Synod, Loba. And I climbed, you know, made the boxes and the boxes and the boxes. And up here are the Japanese people. Shortly below it are the POP volunteers. I mean, they're all on top, you know, and all these other structures. I was way down the bottom. All these other structures are support structures. I said, that's the diagram of the thing. Nobody can argue with it, but they did. They didn't argue. They just don't accept it. They don't argue because you can't. When you asked early, said something early, in our structure, probably in most traditions, I don't know if in the Baptist, written in our Constitution is that not only am I autonomous as a Christian in the Synod, but so is every congregation autonomous.
That's what the Baptist Church is known for.
Well, that's Missouri Synod.
Well,
in practice, forget it.
But see, the Baptist churches in practice, that's real. They say that each Baptist church is like a tub. It sits on its own four legs. And, I mean, that's kind of the saying. And so doctrine is not given down from the top in a Baptist church. I mean, they voluntarily join with the Southern Baptist Conference or the American Baptist Conference, but nobody in that conference tells them what to believe or how to practice. And that's in the Baptist Church. It's I think it is something that the churches protect. I mean, it's a right that they protect. You know, they don't like being told what to do. My uncle is.
See, that's written in the Constitution of Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, but in practice, it's nothing. I mean, it's a joke. Now, other things feeding in. When you ask about the heresy thing, we might as well just finish our morning with this. For example, the book. I'm very proud of the book. I'll let you taste my wine if you let me taste yours. I'm very proud of that. I think it's number 29 or something, but letter. This young woman from North or South Dakota, I put on a team on the south side of Chicago, in the Robert Taylor area, at Larry Morkett's church. And she worked there. when she went back to South Dakota or North Dakota, she wrote me this long letter. No, it wasn't a long, short letter. In every paragraph, she told how she was being really manhandled by being ostracized, called a commie, read everything under the sun. And she would end every paragraph, probably not even knowing she's ending her. I haven't even said anything yet. Every paragraph, but well, I haven't even said anything yet, But just the sheer fact she was working with blacks in Chicago meant she's a commie, et cetera, an enemy of the state, unpatriotic, everything you can imagine. And she would just say, I haven't even said anything yet. Sweet little thing. What I'm saying by that letter, and I could give you story after story of a district president's son arrested in a peace march and so forth. Another one's daughter going with a black guy. I give you story after story of those things, but the thing there is just something you know as well as I do, the political climate at that time. Now, that was the political climate, so it wouldn't take much to push it over the edge for me. With me? Mm-hmm. The thing that really pushed it over the edge was Pastor Mance, pastor of First St. Paul's Lutheran Church, Chicago. It was known in synodical circles. You remember, this is a farming synod. This is a chicken switch Iowa synod. First St. Paul is in Cabrini, between Cabrini Green and Sandburg Village. Okay? Mm-hmm. It was known as, it's actually on the Sandburg property, which Sandburg wanted and couldn't have. It was known as the inner city church, and he was the inner city pastor in synod. Mm-hmm. He had high reputation. He was a spokesperson. All kinds of way to do it in cities. Hello? Yes. iPhone. He writes.
Who, Mance? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. He also commuted to the near north side from the suburbs. He had high expectations when I joined his church for me. Very high. I was in the first 3 sermons. My name was used. I had made it clear to him that I've been very, very active in my local church, but I want to discover for myself what worship means without a lot of busy work. And so don't expect much from me, but I won't bother anybody, Didn't mean a thing to him. The fact that the newly appointed overseas national director of a Peace Corps was a member of his church was too important to him. And so I never bothered anybody. I think I told you I started a lot of things, evening worship for young adults in the area. Didn't I tell you that?
Mm-hmm. St. Matt's
and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Because our doors were locked all week long. And he began to be extremely threatened by me. Incidentally, for low human interest, he had a little right to be in a way, but not at the time. Young Jeff Fort, 121 pounds of him, the Abraham of the Blackstone Rangers, known at that time, I knew personally. And I'd asked him, would he come to the youth group called the Walt League and tell us what is this thing in Woodlawn called the Blackstone Rangers, which incidentally had who the Smothers Brothers had on our program, Coast to Coast, their music dance thing. At the Smothers Brothers' expense, I might add, because all advertisers pulled off that Sunday night hour-long CBS program. But anyhow, Jeff Fort was the Abraham. And a little human interest, he talked to the little Waffley group at First St. Paul Lutheran Church. He's now doing 3 life imprisonments for trying to overthrow the United States government.
Yeah, he's probably doing it for drugs.
No. You don't know the case, do you?
No. I know that
he's charged with having, from jail, via telephone, have made arrangements with Gaddafi.
Oh, okay, yeah.
To get money to overthrow the United States government. That's the charge.
All of his people are charged with drug offense.
That's right. But at any rate, I don't want to spend too long. It got worse and worse. When I would not participate actively, I didn't put it down to anybody, the tearing down of that big, beautiful church so they could build one that fits Sandburg Village better. They didn't use the old one. I didn't see any sense in tearing it down and putting a new one. That really flipped him. But he never, ever confronted me personally. Instead, to all the district presidents, to the president, the bishop of synod and everything else, he poured it on. I got it from everywhere, from Michigan, bishops everywhere, that my name was in writing in all the Christian News. Christian News was to this day, the right wing of the Lutheran Church newspaper. Got clobbered. He led the heresy trial. He couldn't believe that I would bring a wife and 4 kids to the near north side of Chicago. That was even in a sermon once. This inner city pastor. He sent, and he added fuel to it because, see, I had asked, I was on the youth board of Synod. All this fits. That's why it's so hard not to say these things. As a member of the youth board, which is elected by thirds, a third gets elected for a 3-year term. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sure.
So it's rare that you see a whole board replaced because only a third's supposed to. Okay? Mm-hmm. But because our board authorized Pete Seeger's singing at Squaw Valley at an international youth festival, the entire board was dumped in Detroit synodical meeting. And a conservative board was now hired who became my jury in the long run. I'm saying this because already I'm beginning to be known as a radical. I voted for Pete Seegers. I wasn't the only one, but I was one of them. Now, before my term of duty was over, Our youth board met in Chicago with members of other synodical youth boards, AELC, whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
We were all concerned about the fact that a phenomenal dropout was taking place with young adults
Mm-hmm.
in the church. It really was. I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
disastrous. And what to do about it. And so at a 3-day conference, it was decided by the youth board that to do about it meant let's get at the Midland Hotel a full week conference, megabucks, the pastors from across the country to come to, like a couple hundred of them that work with young adults from campus pastors and others, to come together to deal with the question. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I objected and my voice was not heard. My objection was, why don't we get from across the country, why don't we have these same pastors that we so highly prize suggest names of young adults who are concerned about these things and who are about to drop out or have dropped out themselves to come to a conference in Chicago for a week and talk about what's wrong. I thought it was a good idea. So at B&J's restaurant that night after the final meeting, I met with ex-India POPV participant Jerry Glavey, Ruth Parish, and Jody Kretzman, who is working now with me as a CO on the west side.
I'm sorry, you met with Rudy Glazier?
No,
I'm sorry.
Jerry Glavey,
Mm-hmm.
Ruth Parish, and Jody Kretzman.
Mm-hmm.
They were all friends and we were all active and in the city of Chicago, and I told them about this meeting, and they totally agreed with me. You know, I mean, people like themselves should be deciding. Well, they got some things to say,
Mm-hmm.
and so then it was decided that we would have a conference in Chicago where we did it ourselves. We would write different pastors, didn't have to be a pastor, but people who probably knew. Would you know of somebody that's really concerned still about the church, but about had it with the church? You know the kind I'm talking about. Young adult who would be willing to take another last shot. And then the next question, that would be the participants. And I made a suggestion that let's have conservative kids too. They said, and out of that grew a formula that in no way will you or anybody in my age bracket have anything to say, finally, any decision making about who comes and then anything that takes place. I said, okay, but can I make suggestions that are at least discussed? Oh, absolutely. And so that one was put down. They said they were absolutely right. I now know that they were right. To invite a bunch of conservatives there would be just go nowhere. It would not accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. Because the conservatives were living in the past, and the answer to the problem would not be found in the past. Mm-hmm. Then I said, we got a problem, don't we? How are we going to finance this thing? I'll get back to Jimmy Manson in a minute. But first of all, we need a free place to meet. We're talking about a four-day conference. Well, let me ask Jimmy Mance. Big church room all over the place, never used. This is before it was torn down. No way. No way to have these radical, these are all Lutherans, young people. No way. So we went to Fourth Presbyterian Church across from the Hancock building. Sure, you're more than welcome. So that's why we met at the Fourth Presbyterian Church. Beautiful facilities, Lakeshore Drive, Michigan Avenue, free. But these kids are not going to have the money to fly to Chicago. So I said, well, I have a suggestion. We have a lot of ex-YLTPers, ex-POPVers in the Chicago area. Let's hit them all for housing and feeding participants. That was accepted. I have another suggestion. For those that cannot afford to fly here, let's pay their way. And we'll do it this way. If you agree. You don't have to. I happen to know that the bureaucracy, administrators, I don't care what the thing is, they don't want to miss anything. So let's allow anybody concerned with Lutheran youth from any board, any conservative synod, anything else, to come to this conference. Only they have to pay the tuition. And as a matter of fact, let's don't be, what's the word, inclusive or exclusive?
Exclusive.
Let's allow anybody to come. But let's set the tuition at, I don't remember what it was, high. It would be translated much higher today, something like $100 tuition. If they want to pay, let them come. But for all those administrators, any clergy, anybody that wants to come and pay the tuition, please remember that they do not have a voice. They're to be treated just like laymen are treated at synodical conventions, who are welcome to come and sit in the galleries, but don't vote. And we'll close in a minute. You follow me?
Yeah.
But that will give us enough money to offer scholarships to the folks that want to fly here. That was accepted.
Yeah.
So we had a good arrangement.
A socialist travel pool.
Socialist travel pool. But please understand, if you understand my life, this is how I view experts.
Mm-hmm.
I was an expert, and I was telling the self-determining group what could be done and what couldn't be done. It's up to you. You're going to have a bunch of oldies here. They won't be allowed to speak, but they'll still be around. Would you rather not have them here? Okay, but where are you getting the damn money from to fly the good kids here? That's how I believe all administrations should function. That's how I believe universities should function. That's a pattern in my life. Well, anyhow, that was called the Lutheran. They wanted to call it the Labor Day Conference on War and Race. It was to be held over a long Labor Day weekend before everybody went back to school. Labor Day Conference on War and Race. I think I was right here. I said, if that's the title, it ain't going to mean a hell of beans to the public or the church. There are all sorts of these kinds of things going on all over the place. You have to add one word to it. Lutheran, the Labor Day Conference on War and Race. If you want to make a difference, right or wrong, I was right on making a difference. This was the catalyst with Jimmy Mance that led to my heresy trial. Even though I made no decisions whatsoever, the moment this was announced in the papers, from Maine to California, I got the calls. Know what you're trying to do. And the officialdom started saying it a lot more. This is ungodly, and so forth. And the biggest thing they said was, by whose authority is this meeting taking place? And I said, I'm never good at words. I guess God's. I don't know.
That sounds big. Like blasphemy.
Went over big, and my board and everything else. Everybody called me. Who gave you the right to do this and call this conference? I didn't call this conference. Young adults in the Lutheran Church who care about race and the war and the church's position are calling it. They're the ones that are calling it. They're the ones that are orchestrating it. They're the ones that are putting it together. They're the ones that are financing it, etc., etc. I happen to be in agreement with them, but I didn't make any of the decisions. They don't hear that at all. Didn't hear one word of that. I orchestrated it. Now, this is a minor thing, but it's not a minor thing. I mean, this blew it. When I have the documents, which you should have what they turned out. It stands tall today on war and race. The church on war and race. They had plenary sessions. They worked night and day. This wasn't a bullshit conference. I am telling you, this was something to behold. I was an observer. And they had one rule of thumb when different groups would come in for plenary sessions, and then at the end, then they would vote. And any majority rule would pass. If it's a majority, then the would go down in the recommendations. Okay, with one exception: if there was somebody conscientiously objecting, then we would not pass it. It would be passed on the basis of names only. Everybody would have to sign who passed it. It wouldn't be automatically passed by the conference. You with me? I thought it was a hell of a thing myself. Well, anyhow, all the young men had one little one at the end. Hell no, we won't go. So, guess what comes out of the little press conference? Some great stuff was passed on war and race in the church. I mean, really well documented, well written stuff. Okay, but
they went to the bottom line.
Big black headlines in the Daily News, Chicago Daily News, from Maine to California. Lutheran youth, you got to remember the period. Mm-hmm. Lutheran youth say, hell no, we won't go. Wally was starting to squirm. I mean, round-the-clock phone calls. We'll quit now because you got to work. But that began with Jimmy Mance's sending a secretary to spy on me at everything. He sent a secretary all over the country to listen to me, to take notes, and so forth. My pastor broke every ordination vow he could break to spy on me, and he was the chief witness at the trial of my heresy. There's so many other things that go into that, it ain't funny. You can't imagine how churchy he was. I'll finish in this bit. When I decided that no kid's going anywhere until they know what an American city is, thanks to Michael Harrington, that's when I got them involved in West Side and Cabrini and everything else. During the riots, I mean, our kids were lying on the floor when the guns were shooting in Blackfield's homes. I was at my command post. It was a trip. What was I going to? I didn't know what I was going to say, though. Oh, shit, I've forgotten. I wasn't going to send anybody anywhere until they knew what an American city is. They were all from Chicken Switch, Iowa. Now, why was I saying that?
Oh, you talking about Mance and Michael Harrington? He was sending people all around to look.
I wouldn't send them there anywhere until they knew. Oh, I know. But in the training program, I would bring in George Hoyer. George Hoyer, probably to this day, for all I know, for 50 years was the teacher at the Lutheran Seminary on how to preach. I would bring him in. I would bring liturgist Ray Schulze from New Haven, Connecticut. Would you take care of the theological part of the training program? We would have liturgical worship services. I mean, before we would go out and march against the school system of Chicago in practice, we would have a church service, okay? So at the trial, jumping away ahead, they would take some of Ray Schulze's liturgical church. I hear that this one. I was the one that asked for known theological people to come and orchestrate a theological training for my kids. Okay. Now they charge me with Ray Schulze they took phrases out of the liturgical thing, which were up-to-date, modern, having to do with West Side and inner cities and so forth. And look what he says in the liturgical stuff, I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't swear words, but it was very real life, stuff in the liturgical stuff. I mean, they did that. I asked for, give me good theological, give me good churchy stuff, And,
hire the professionals.
The Michigan bishop came down here at the trial and testified against me on the liturgical crap that went on. I had nothing to do. I didn't know liturgy. Don't like it. So anyhow, that's enough. But there was big stuff, big times. Meanwhile, I got 4 kids and a wife, and a lot of things happening.
Well, it's funny because they didn't understand the times,
or the church, or the calling. What I mean.
Not only was this a good thing for the church, but it may have been. I mean, it was your idea. But once having floated it out there, you probably couldn't have stopped it if you wanted to.
No. True. True.
It's they listened to you, and you provided some help to make it work better. So you probably really were guilty.
Oh, I was good. I triggered it. There's no question about it. Had I not brought my feelings and thoughts from that meeting to the threesome, it wouldn't have happened. They weren't sitting around thinking about it. Mm-hmm. But that's a point that's important in my life, is that I'm not good at the follow-up. I mean, this is as good of an example of everything I've done as any. You got to see that this was the first of 3 conferences since then. We had 3 conferences. Years to follow. Mm-hmm. They put together, the document they put together is a work of art. No way could I have done it. I couldn't have touched it. I couldn't have orchestrated it. I couldn't have made it happen. It's a little like what's happening right now, just beginning to happen with Hilltop and some things. I couldn't do I can't do what's going on.
Well, yeah, but you can make sure that it happens.
Yeah, And, there comes the hammer, I was known as a housing person. No, that ain't what Project Neighbors is about. But without the houses, it wouldn't have happened. It really wouldn't have. Yeah. From the beginning, when I started this thing, it had practically nothing to do with housing. We were going to rent places and subsidize them.
Patty and I were on a walk last night, walked by 208 Erie. Stennis and Lisa are out there just fixing. Oh, God. Stennis is putting the deck on, and Lisa's out there putting...
We're going to be putting a full deck this week.
Patio tiles. Yeah, that's what he was working on.
What was he doing?
Oh, I don't know. He's walking around.
Yeah, he's just measuring.
Yeah. Lisa's, putting these bricks on the side where all the mud is and whatnot. They put the backyard in. And,
it's grass is thick.
We walked around with it and we nod at it. But yeah, I always liked this house. I thought I'd never move from here and whatnot. But now, what is this? Is this still a problem here with the sewer and all that stuff? He says, twice a year I got to route it out. I said, yeah, I used to run 110 feet of that stuff in there. I'd rent the thing every 6 months. He says, well, I should get Midwest Cleaning in here to do it for $65. He said, Walt pays for that. He said, so I'm just going to pay for it from now on. I think so. Mm-hmm. It's your ball game now. Yeah. So it's funny what the ownership does.
Oh, it's just, you can't imagine how my life changed after I got rid of those apartments. Just drove me up the wall. Just drove me. I will not ever touch apartments.
What do you mean?
People don't have any ownership in apartments. Yeah. And they don't care for places. Everybody cares for their place because they know they either own it or going to own it. God, what a difference that makes. Yeah. You wouldn't believe the Ramoses. That damp old basement.
Yeah.
It's a plush room.
Yeah.
Couches, carpet, TV. Same thing as going toward. But that isn't how I started. But what you were saying is there needs to be the marriage of structure somehow with the concepts. Otherwise, it's just academia. You know what I mean? Somehow the two got to be put together in creative tension. It can't be one without the other. That's why I turned down that thing with the bank years ago. Then I would be just structure. No way could I practice the concepts. Because that's something I really want to talk about is what do I want somebody to know what I consider. First of all, anybody that doesn't think change isn't needed is out of their head. There's a lot out of their heads. Then the next question is, what would change things? I've ruled out politics. Well, what do I rule in? I'd like to talk about that. And how would that happen? So, George, you got work to do today. On a beautiful day.
I hate to do it.
Huh?